Welcome to the Real Estate Syndication Show. Whether you are a seasoned investor or building a new real estate business, this is the show for you. Whitney Sewell talks to top experts in the business. Our goal is to help you master real estate syndication. And now your host, Whitney Sewell.
This is your daily real estate syndication show. I'm your host, Whitney Sewell. Today, our guest is Brandon Abbott. Thanks for being on the show, Brandon.
Hey, good morning, Whitney. Thanks for having me.
Glad to have you on the show. You have some expertise that I know the listeners and I can learn a lot from. A little about Brandon. He has 10 years in the construction industry, 10 years in the insurance adjusting industry. I mean, both of those are such good skill sets that we need in this business. But 3 years in the multifamily industry as a passive investor and an operator with a portfolio of over 2,200 units and nearly $275 million. So, Brandon, thank you again for your time this morning and sharing with the listeners. And give us a little more about who you are, maybe your all's focus, and highlight obviously the group that you're with. And let's jump in.
Yeah, definitely. So I'll give you a little bit about my personal background, who I am, where I live, and what I'm made of. So what I'm made of is my family, right? And I have a wife, Ashley, and I have 4 daughters. So that's, everybody usually gasps at that. 4 girls, that's crazy. So it's a blessing, I promise. So I have high school down to elementary age. I have one getting ready to get her learner's permit in 2 weeks. So that's a big step in the right direction. And I have 2 that have birthdays coming up soon. So they're growing and excited. And then, we have a couple dogs, and we live in Columbia, actually West Columbia, South Carolina, and which is where my other business partner with PassiveInvesting.com, that's the group that we are partners in. Dan is also located in Columbia, South Carolina, and our other partner, Danny Randazzo. We formed PassiveInvesting.com. We're a real estate syndication group in multifamily. We purchase and operate assets in the Southeast. I've been doing that for quite some time now and loving every minute of it.
Awesome. Well, Brandon, I know your specialty, is really just looking at properties, assessing the CapEx and numerous areas, and the insurance issues too, just because of your previous background, which is just incredible value to the team, that you're a part of, no doubt about it. But, let's jump into some of those problem areas that to look for that maybe we don't. When we're assessing properties, we're looking at properties, doing walkthroughs, or assessing CapEx and things like that. I'd love to just dive in there and really bring out your expertise a little bit and help the listeners and myself to just understand better what we should be looking for.
Sure. And so our team is broken up into 3 sections, Dan, Danny, and myself. I'm in charge of acquisitions. So I actually talk with the brokers and build that relationship, meet with them, have coffee, go on the tours, and build that personal relationship, because that's very important. First of all, that's, from an acquisition standpoint, you've got to build credibility, confidence, and they have to have confidence in your group's ability to close properties. And then just they have to like you as a person, really. So that's the first step in the acquisitions process, is building those relationships. It's a very small industry. Brokers know brokers, and sellers know sellers and buyers, and everybody talks, and your reputation precedes you. And my recent article that is on our website about a good name is to be desired above many riches is something that we believe strongly in. We don't like to waver or nickel and dime people. We like to commit and make it as easy as possible in the purchase process. And part of that, making it easy as possible during the due diligence, is looking ahead at any particular problems that you might encounter before you put it under contract, because at that point in time, that's pretty much done. And if you miss something that's of large consequence, you may have to go back and retrade the property, go back to the seller and ask for a lower price or concessions or anything on that nature. So we like to underwrite conservatively so that we can absorb any type of unknowns, but we like to foresee any unknowns possible. And the way I do that is I look at the property in depth while I'm there. One of my biggest tools that I use is a drone. I send that up and look at the roofs and the overall lay of the property. And I can go all over the property and stand in one spot, or sit in my car for that matter, and check out all of the, property, any kind of drainage issues. Because from that level, from that bird's eye view, you can kind of see any kind of erosion issues that are happening on the property or different patterns like that. The only issue you run into with the drone is if you're in if it's in a flight path of a major airport, you have to have clearance from the airport. But I usually flying at tree levels, or a little bit above that. So I don't usually run into that issue, but that's one of the tools I use. I want to look for any potential issues that we have, and we want to include that in our CapEx and our underwriting, because that's money that we need to account for. So if the roofs need to be replaced, I want to know about it. If there's, drainage issues, I want to know about it. So that's, and that comes from the construction background. Just having that knowledge. I've done everything in the construction industry. Every step I've actually done myself. And so I understand how it works and what's behind it and what are the pieces and what's the process. And I can just kind of see that vision. And it also helps when putting together the budgets, because I know how long it takes and how much I should be getting charged. And so when somebody comes with a really crazy estimate, I know that it's a really crazy estimate, and it's not going to take as long as they say.
Well, let's jump into a few of those things there. I know, and it's talking about a drone just for a second. I don't think anyone's talked about using a drone on the show before, so that's interesting. And I've heard that about you all before, and I've heard you all talk about it. And using a drone, when should we invest in a piece of equipment like that? Who should have a drone?
I think whoever's touring your property for your group. If you're doing it yourself, definitely I would bring the drone along. It's a small investment. It's, you're a decent drone. I use a DJI Mavic Pro. They have the Mavic 2 out now with a little bit better zoom camera, but the Mavic Pros works just fine. I think I paid around $900 for that. But what you can do with that is pretty much endless, because once we talked about, inspecting the property, but once you put it under contract and you're syndicating the deal and you're wanting to make a presentation to your investors, well, we can use drone footage, more decorative drone footage, to put into our presentation. So it's not only a tool to build CapEx, it's also a tool to build marketing. So both of those it pays for itself, halfway through the first deal that you'll ever use it for. So, and from the insurance aspect, there is technology with those drones where I can actually, fly the drone. I can plug it into a software. It'll take the drone off. It'll fly it around the entire asset, taking photos at preset locations, and it'll build a 3D model of the asset. And I can import that into estimating software, and I have macros pre-built for whatever I want to do. So it imports the 3D model. I click on my macro, and within a minute, I can write a $400,000 roof replacement without ever breaking out a tape measure. So there's a lot of pros to that. That does take a little bit of experiential knowledge, though.
So the software will actually fly the drone for you to take those measurements? Correct.
They you have to go in and kind of tell it where any obstacles would be. So it pulls up a satellite image for you, and okay, you just pinpoint a tree here and a tree here, but the drone has obstacle avoidance too, so it's not going to just slam into something. It knows when it's getting close, and it'll stop, or
it's not going to self-destruct.
Right, correct, yeah. Yeah. Well, and that same software, once I write the estimate, you can actually just pull satellite images, and you don't even need the drone, and it'll import a 3D model with measurements into the software as well. That software, for anybody listening, is called Xactimate, spelled with an X. Xactimate. It's pretty pricey. I think it's about $1,600 per year for a subscription, but it's invaluable. We're using it right now on a few assets, so it's definitely worth the money.
So is that something that anybody could do, or is that as far as the insurance, or the quote there, to replace a roof, is that something anybody could do, or is that something like you can do because of your insurance background?
Well, I definitely can do it because of my insurance background, but
right.
It's like anything else. I'm of the mindset that the only reason you don't know how to do something is because you've never done it before. And so once you do it, so someone else learned it at some point in time. So why can't you also learn it? That's just my methodology. And they have videos out there. They have YouTube videos to show you how to do it, how to build roof systems. And if it's really the hardest part is drawing the building and sketching it out. But if it's imported from a satellite image, it's really kind of easy. So it's not rocket science. Nothing is rocket science. Even rocket science, not rocket science, you know?
So what are some problem areas? Well, actually, I wanted to ask you quickly about like the drainage issue. You said like you can see that from the drone, and how easy is that to see, and why is that important?
Well, let's say you have a retention pond, or there's maybe some areas that are washing out. You can just, from being up high, you can kind of see the areas that are washing out where you may not notice it, just walking around the property. And then you definitely are going to notice it with where the broker is going to take you on the property, right? They're going to take you to the most pretty spots, and you may not want to walk through the weeds, with the copperheads and stuff like that, and check out to see if there is drainage. So it's a very safe way to just kind of get up there. And another good thing, like I mentioned in the marketing, you can get up high and you can kind of scan, you can put it on a 360 and it can scan all the way around. You can show everybody what kind of businesses are around. You can do that on Google Maps too, but it's nice to have that live video. It makes it look more professional. So it's just a good way to get literally a bird's eye view of what you're about to put under contract or make an offer on. Sure.
I'm sure it brings things out that you're going to see that you need to investigate further.
Correct. Exactly. Right. And it's that edge, in a world of, there's a lot of people wanting to buy assets out there. It's a competitive market. So why not give yourself an edge over other people?
So what are a few CapEx things that maybe, to look for that potentially other people that you notice in this industry may not be looking at when they're buying properties?
Sure. So, you have the normal ones that I think most, people buying multifamily know about, and that's your plumbing and your electrical. You don't want aluminum, and you don't want any polybutylene. That's the gray piping. It's really not the piping; it's the fittings that's the issue. It's the polybutylene fittings. So those are kind of common, but once you get into the 80s, 90s, we usually buy Class B, Class A assets now, and we've kind of shifted that, and we can talk about that a little bit later if you want, but. Those are some things as far as the infrastructure of the bones. What type of subfloor does it have? Does it have gypcrete, or is it subfloor? Gypcrete is like they use a fiber board they put down over top of the trusses, and they pour a very thin layer of self-leveling concrete on that. That's gypcrete. And in older assets, 86 assets, they've broken up. There's been repairs, and you may run into issues. It's going to affect whether you can do glue down laminate or you have to use floating laminate, because if you have to go in there and prep the floor, even though glue down laminate is more expensive, by the time you have all the floor prep because of your damaged gypcrete underneath of your glue down, it's cheaper just to go with floating and just go over top of all that mess. So factoring in different things like that. Are the windows fogged up? Are there any broken seals on that, especially with the old aluminum windows, sliding glass doors? The biggest one is the roof. And that's one that most people do not bring a ladder out and check out first thing. That's one.
Personally, you mean bring a ladder out and check firsthand?
Right. Because I don't go to tours wearing a suit and tie. The brokers do. I'm not that guy. I'm collared shirt and a pair of jeans. But even in that, I don't really want to break out a 20-foot extension ladder and climb up on a roof. So that's where the drone comes in really handy. And so you can look for any kind of storm damage or anything that you may have to deal with coming down the road.
Yeah. I would love to be able to see the roofs firsthand, but personally, I do not want to get up on, 3-story roof. It's the risk.
Nobody does. Three stories, right? Rough. Yeah, exactly. Ironically, I was an insurance adjuster for many years and climbed a lot of roofs. And ironically, I do not like heights, so we go to New York City and, my wife wants to go to the Rockefeller Center and I'm up against the building. I just don't like it. But, I guess, I think I can survive a 2-story fall. So it's good. Where it's 65 stories, you're pretty much done for.
You mentioned, I didn't want to forget though, you mentioned shifting from, say Class C product or 70s or early 80s product to now you all are shifting to say Class A, Class B products. Could you elaborate on that? Let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. And so as a group, or if you're starting out in syndication, you have to have your criteria set. You got to know what you want to purchase. You can't just say, I want to purchase apartments. Okay. Well, that's a big, category. So you narrow it down, whether it's number of units or cost of the asset, or, I know there's other criteria as far as financially, as far as ROI are concerned, but as far as, what year, what vintage is it? Is it value add or is it core? Core being it just performs or is cash flowing. We started out as value add. Most people do. It's a great industry. But we saw early on, we started with kind of a upper C class for our first asset, which required a ton of CapEx. And it's great, right? You're like, oh, I can do this. And we were blowing everybody's prices out of the water because I'm a pretty hard negotiator on material costs. So we were using our volume to directly negotiate material costs with manufacturers and not going through any distributors. And so it's great. That's all great and all that. But what we found with the C class, that neighborhood has a reputation. And no matter what you do with it, it takes time for that reputation to go away. It will eventually, if that's your model, that's fine. I'm not trying to discourage anybody from reclassing a property, but I just want to warn people that it's not just a simple matter of putting in granite and painting it and putting a new exterior and replacing all the windows, and then magically all your tenants are, just wonderful tenants that pay their bills on time and never have any, criminal activity or anything like that. Because it takes time, and people in the neighborhood, they know that neighborhood. They've lived in the area for their whole life, and they're like, oh, that place. Well, my friend lived there 15 years ago, and this happened, and it has nothing to do with you, but it's a stigma that you have to overcome. So we found that the best way to do that would be to deoccupy the units and then reoccupy it with your desired demographic. That is harder to do from an investor, from a syndication standpoint, because of returns, right? You want to be paying those distributions. So we looked at, and it was a lot of work. I mean, oh my word, it's just tons of work and coordination and contractors, and having contractors is like, it's literally like babysitting. I mean, it's just constant putting out arguments and discussions with your on-site team and the contractors. It's just, so us as a group, and again, this is a decision we made personally. This is not anything that I'm saying everybody has to do, because it's most certainly not the case. We started seeing that we could purchase assets that required less CapEx, maybe just a little bit of paint, maybe just replace the Formica with granite, something we could do really quickly, a couple $1,000s, and we could command maybe $150,000 or $150 rent increase, as opposed to spending, $12,000 and getting a $250 rent bump. So you see where the difference is. Your return on investment is so much greater on the smaller, and it's easier to implement. Your stabilization period is less. And then we found out that if you didn't do anything, you can get assets that are just cash flowing, and you can come in and they're just ready to go, and you can make money without touching it, and you just buy it and then you make money. So that's kind of our evolution as a company, which proved to be very valuable coming into COVID-19. And, there's some key factors in that we can discuss that just kind of, we did not plan it that way, but it just worked out well.
Yeah. And it's a mindset shift now, right? All of us have been focused on value add for a while. And so now, but could you elaborate a little just on the mindset behind, okay, the difference in purchasing that Class A product versus the value add? Are you still going to have any type of value add component, or is it just they're stable, they're cash flowing from day one, so why not?
Well, we are not turning down value add properties, but it's definitely, we're not going after the heavy lifts where we're just having to pretty much rebrand the property. We definitely don't want to do that. So we're looking at, our group looks at a mid 2000 to 2015, maybe even further if it's stabilized, 2018 product. So again, we're looking at something is doing well, it's well maintained, there's no issues on the property, but it's a little bit, outdated. So we can just modernize it a little bit, just a little bit of paint. We're still looking at those, but the Class A's, the reason, with COVID-19, okay, let's say you were planning to increase rents by $150 per month. Well, now, your tenants are maybe haven't been able to go to work. So that's all put on pause. And how long is it going to be until you're able to implement those rent increases? Your guess is as good as mine, because we just don't know right now. So from a risk mitigation perspective, we like the Class A's right now. At this point in time with COVID and we also have just kind of flattened our rent increases, and just that's the way we're underwriting. So that's why we like the Class A's right now more than the value adds.
When you say flattened your rent increases, does that mean like 1% growth or 2% growth or just zero?
We have one that we just recently purchased that we only projected a $9 increase over 18 months. In the first 18 months. And here's the thing, that was our original underwriting before COVID. And again, it just happened to hit at the right moment, and we're like thankful. It was like the deal that was made for COVID-19, because literally 2 days after we signed the contract, lockdown. And we just closed last Friday on this particular asset. And thank the Lord, everything worked out well, but it was hard. We had to deal with a lot of obstacles. But if there was one deal that was designed to go through that, it would have been this one.
Wow. Congratulations. I just want to say that because I know your other team members, and I've talked to them as well through this process, and you all have worked so hard to make that happen. And I know it's a big deal to have closed during all this. So it shows just your all's level of work ethic and professionalism. So congratulations to that.
Well, and to speak to that, being able to close through this has really helped us. I talked in the beginning about, your reputation to brokers. It kind of has put us in a lead position in our markets, because they're like, no one else did that, or was able to close a deal on time in the middle of COVID. So it's kind of like, passiveinvesting.com. That's pretty impressive. So when you're in a deal and you're investing final, and the broker's encouraging the seller to go to a specific buyer, your name's going to come up a little bit more. They're going to encourage that seller to pick you, because these guys get it done, right? And so that's the thing I wanted to, you got to remember is each transaction is remembered by the brokers and the sellers, and it'll come back to either compliment you or to insult you later on. So just always remember that when transacting.
I love it when a broker calls us and says, we'd love for y'all to make an offer because we know you can close.
Oh yeah. It's great. Yeah. It's where you want to be. Reputation is everything. It's everything.
So, I know that you have, because of your expertise and you're part of the team, like you all have even gotten some free roofs lately, right? Or there's been some creative things or ways that you've done that during the contract process. I'd love for you to talk about that a little bit.
Sure. And this is where, insurance savvy does come into play, but anybody can do this. Everybody has an insurance policy on the property. The seller has an insurance policy on the property. So, for instance, we had an asset in the Southeast that we put under contract. In our due diligence, we do a closer inspection, and I'm looking specifically for wind or hail damage to the roofs. That is damage. It's in the insurance. It's anything that's sudden or accidental is what's covered. So any slow leaks or anything like that, leakage and seepage is not covered. So I'm not looking for that. I'm looking for storm damage, broken shingle tabs, dented gutter downspouts from hail. You can see it on the fins of the AC units where the hail hit that. I'm looking, I get up on the roof and you do a 10 by 10 test section. If you have 15 hail impacts in that 10 by 10, you have a claim. Okay. So that's step number one. I find the damage. If I have damage, then I need to find a data loss. So this gets a little technical, so bear with me. So you want to know what the policy period was of the seller. This is an asset we're getting ready to buy. So when did they put the insurance policy on the property? Now I have to find a storm event within that policy period that lines up with the damage that I found, because they're going to say, well, that happened before that insurance policy, so that's not part of our policy. So I've got to prove that it happened. And you can get on NOAA, the weather agency, and find hail reports. I use CoreLogic. And you can pull lightning strike reports. I mean, it'll tell you where every lightning struck and how much radius it had and how many volts it put off.
That's called NOAA?
That one is called CoreLogic. and you can pull, it'll tell you the centimeter of the hail, how many miles away it was from the actual address, so it's very detailed. And I print those reports off and I send them off to the insurance company. So in cases where we're putting something under contract, that we already put it under contract, we inspected, I found damage, I found a data loss that I can use. I have the seller file a claim against their property, against their insurance carrier, not mine, theirs. They own the property still. And we get the insurance company to agree to replace the roofs. They have to under that policy. And the seller, it's on the seller's insurance policy. And a lot of people are like, well, aren't they concerned? Do they not want to do that because of their claim history? Well, they're getting ready to sell the asset. So the claim history, the loss runs is what that's called for that asset, are going to disappear from them. So they're not really worried about it. And I can get free roofs. The only thing you're going to be short the deductible. Most sellers will not pay the deductible. And, but if you can get a roof replaced, like it's going to cost you $250,000 and you just had to come up with $10,000 of your deductible, that's a win in my book. So
I'm going to gladly pay that deductible.
Exactly. So that's a true case scenario that we've implemented in an asset in the Southeast under contract. And then there's the other aspect of once you own a property. So I can elaborate on that. Like we just had some storms roll through the Southeast, tornadoes in Tennessee and in South Carolina. And everybody's like, oh, I hope nothing happened to your assets. And I'm like, I hope something did happen to them. And as long as nobody got hurt, I see the value in it, because that's why you have insurance policies. And so first thing I do, I send someone out or I go out myself and I get up and inspect it. I have I got a roof replaced in Tennessee on one of our assets, and that's starting in a couple days. And so the entire complex getting brand new roofs. That is a huge value add, because when somebody goes to buy that, the first question they're going to ask, how old are the roofs? And if they're 20, 25 years old, the mortgage company is going to make them escrow money to replace the roofs, because they're going to have to replace it within their hold period. So if you come in and they're like, oh, the roofs are brand new, I just replaced them last year. Great. That's excellent. That's money that you're going to see in your sale. That's going to come back to you that you did not spend. The insurance company paid for that. So it's a huge, I'm working on 2 more in our South Carolina assets with the same type of thing.
Could that delay closing if we were, say, trying to get the seller's insurance company to pay for that fix?
Yeah, that's a good question. So what we want to do is just get the insurance company to commit to replacing the roofs before the deal is closed. But we don't necessarily have to have the roofs replaced before then, because then we have an amendment to the contract where the seller assigns the rights to the claim to us as the buyer. And that's fine. That's normal. I mean, if you were selling a house, the same thing would occur. You just transfer that over and they just write the check. It depends on the amount of the check. They get a little fishy. They're suspect when they start writing big checks over a couple $100,000. So they do title searches and all that, and they'll write the check to whoever held the title, and then you just have it transferred. But no, it has not delayed closing ever. We've never had a deal go past closing. Well, we had one, but that was because of a neighboring dry cleaner that possibly contaminated the soil. Didn't end up being that way, but that was the only delay we've ever had in the closing.
It's just great to bring up. I know on the last asset we purchased, or actually two ago, it was a very similar thing. It was roofs and quite a bit of siding that was replaced by the seller's insurance. So yeah, it's something definitely to be thinking about when you're going through that process, right?
And most people don't think about it. And I forget that it's natural to me. It's the first thing that comes to my mind. And I forget again that people just don't have that perspective really, because they haven't been in that industry. And I'm always looking for that value add, that free value add, if you will.
So Brandon, what's been the hardest part of this syndication business for you?
The hardest part starting out is the reputation or the credibility in the industry. When you're new, we liken it to a jet taking off, right? You burn all your fuel on takeoff, or most of your fuel on takeoff, but once you're at cruising altitude, you're really not burning that much fuel. You've gotten up to cruising altitude. That initial ascent is difficult because you're new. Nobody knows who you are. big brokers who have been dealing with all these big names and these developers and these purchasers and buyers and national REITs. And they're like, who are these people? Are these just tire kickers? And so you really have to be able to legitimately talk a good game. And I say that because you don't want to ever inflate something that's not true about yourself, but you do want to put yourself in the best light possible. You need to point out your strengths. You need to be able to talk a good game. You need to be able to know, they're going to ask you questions, and whether you know it or not, they're testing you out. They're asking you questions, and they're going to go away from your meeting and have a discussion with their broker buddies about whether this group is legitimate or not. And they're going to know, well, I heard from so-and-so that this group is not, they're just brand new. So that's the hardest thing to getting into it. Once you get into it, you just need to make sure your first deal, you better close it. You better close it seamlessly, and you better close it on time if at all possible. And don't nickel and dime people. It's not worth saving $10,000 on a deal and you feel you got a good deal, and then everybody on the other side is mad at you and you'll never do another transaction again. So you have to remember, what is the value of arguing over something? You got to look at the big picture.
What's a way you all have recently improved your business, or maybe you personally, that we could also apply to ours?
Yeah. So again, it's being able to shift. I think that's what makes us a successful company. With new technology, you see companies that aren't able to look at the future and are unwilling to change their business model, and they die. You have to be able to change with the times. You have to see you have to have a vision. You have to take initiative. You have to see the problem, and not just the problem, but a solution. So, something that we're constantly doing, we're constantly evolving. It's you have a goal, and that's your goal. But as soon as you see a change in the landscape, you have to be able to adjust that goal. And, one thing that I will, tell everybody listening is you have to set high goals. I see this with so many people, and it's like, if you aim for the wall, you're going to hit the floor. If you aim for the sun, you'll at least hit the moon, right? So like, you have to aim high. Don't set mediocre goals. Set ones that are, to you, unachievable, but they're not, or else you wouldn't have set that. So set very high goals and take action. I mean, oh man, you got to take action. That's the number. I mean, so many people want to do stuff and they talk about it, and my wife will tell you, I'm an impatient person when I'm kind of, I can't sit still. And so I don't like idle talk. If I'm talking about it, it probably means I'm going to do it. It's just a matter of I'm hashing out the details in my mind. So again, just being able to shift with the landscape and take action.
What's the number one thing that's contributed to your success?
I would have to attribute that to God, because I personally feel that nothing happens apart from him. I mean, any knowledge that I've assumed is because of his hand in my life. So the fact that if, I could tell you an hour-long story of how each step moved me into a different industry and the hardships that we went through. And I look back on that and I see a planning. And so I'm thankful for the knowledge that I have, but I don't attribute it to anything that I myself have done. So, there, by the grace of God, go I. To anybody else out there, I am where I am by the grace of God.
I couldn't agree more. Thank you for sharing that, Brandon. And how do you like to give back?
So, as a Christian, I give back to my local church body. That's where I find in scripture that I'm supposed to. The reason, I'll give you a little of my personal theology. The reason why God makes people successful is so that they can help others in need. He didn't give you the knowledge that he gave you just for your own personal benefit. Yes, I do benefit, and I'm thankful for that, because there are people that are wealthy and there are people that are not. I'm not going to pinpoint why the people are not. Maybe that's the Lord's will for their life, but I'm thankful that he has given me success, and I'm thankful that I'm able to use that to benefit others that have a need. That's all there is. And that's what I find in the New Testament is the model that I follow. So as far as, different charities, I know a lot of people give to charities, but I'm pretty strict about just giving to the local assembly in that sense. I mean, obviously there are other things that we work on and that we help out with, but that's, and with time too, our company's called passiveinvesting.com. That's for a reason. We want income streams coming in while I'm sleeping. So that means that I have more time to go help out. We like to travel. I've been to Papua New Guinea a couple times, and we plan on taking our kids on a few mission trips and, building some schools and putting in some runways and stuff. That's how I love to get my hands dirty. So that's how I like to give back.
Nice. Well, tell the listeners how they can get in touch with you, learn more about you, and also the summit coming up.
Yeah, definitely. Well, passiveinvesting.com, you can go to our website. That's pretty easy. Just passiveinvesting.com. That is our company name as well. A lot of people get it confused and they're like, oh, the passive team or the passive investing team. It's the passiveinvesting.com team. We actually are branding the .com. So that's important to remember. My email, brandon@passiveinvesting.com. You're welcome to email me there. I'm on Facebook as well. Whitney mentioned the summit coming up. That is June 11th through the 13th. So the Multifamily Investor Nation Summit was doing virtual summits before it was cool. So, now with COVID, everybody's doing Zoom. Man, Zoom's old hat for us. So Dan, my other business partner with Passive Investing, heads that up. And that's coming up, again, June 11th through 13th. So you can get some great content, great speakers about all kinds of aspects of investing and, real estate, just all kinds of speakers from the comfort of your own home. There's 2 rooms, I believe, going this time. They record. So if you can't get one live, you can get it and you can ask questions live. So it's a great, great opportunity. There's a ton, I'm telling you, there's a lot of content. I've been to a lot of conferences and listened to a lot of speakers. And this one I've learned the most from, and I know I'm partial to this because I'm a part of it, but it is really a great conference. So that's Multifamily Investor Nation Summit, June 11th to the 13th. And there's a promo code, and it's Whitney. Okay, you just type in Whitney, you get $100 off, and all the proceeds for the summit go to Whitney's nonprofit. So that's something we've discussed on prior summits with the Multifamily Investor Nation Summit and Whitney. And so we love what he's doing, and we love to help out where we can. So make sure you use that promo code, Whitney, to spell WHITNEY. And type that in, and we'd love to see you there.
Thank you for listening to the Real Estate Syndication Show, brought to you by LifeBridge Capital. LifeBridge Capital works with investors nationwide to invest in real estate, while also donating 50% of its profits to assist parents who are committing to adoption. LifeBridge Capital, making a difference, one investor and one child at a time. Connect online at www.lifebridgecapital.com for free material and videos to further your success.